So if somebody is renting a house, they are going to pay utility costs. It could be heating, electricity,
Okay.
water.
Can we divide it into two parts for condos and then freehold properties?
If you're planning to keep pets in a house, landlords cannot deny you from doing it. If anybody any landlord enters in the lease that pets are not allowed, that lease is null and void. Let's say you are renting a house,
Yeah.
okay, and you have a driveway, and somebody slips on your driveway and falls, and that person, let's say, decides to sue the occupant.
Okay.
In that case, the occupant is the tenant, not the landlord. The landlord's insurance will not protect against the liability issues because that's just a landlord's insurance covering the building. So which means that will come to you as a tenant. If you are covered by insurance, you're okay. If you're not, then you're in a big trouble. Second, do ask roughly how much are the utility costs. Sometimes the houses are very old, the insulation might be poor, right? Windows might be having a lot of air leak, so your heating bills can be too high.
Mandeep Basra, welcome to my brand new show, Chai with Chander.
Thank you very much. It's always exciting to be here.
How are you?
I'm good, very good. How are you doing?
I'm good, thank you, and very excited because this one is first episode for our series. As we discussed, right? We are gonna make few series in the different categories like real estate, mortgage, and finance industry.
Yeah.
And for real estate, I'm very excited that I'm gonna start it with you. We have done few episodes in Hindi, but it's gonna be very nice to talk with you in English as well.
It will be a lot of fun, I'm sure, yes.
So let's start with our first episode, and this is gonna be on the rental property in Canada, right? I'll start with the very basic question.
Yeah.
As you know, it looks very casual and it's very basic, like rental properties. When you're going to rent a property in Canada, you just look for a property and rent it. It's very basic, right? Why we are talking about rental property in Canada today in this episode? What is the main reason that we should talk about rentals?
First of all, almost every first homeowner is a tenant one day. So it's very important. And secondly, when you're paying rent to live somewhere, why not be picky? Why not talk about the benefits or the drawbacks of renting a place so that the money you are spending there is actually worth? So that's why it's very important.
Okay, you think like people take this segment for granted many times?
Sometimes newcomers, especially people who are new to the city or new to country many times, they take it very much for granted, but that should not be the case because we will discuss a lot of details, but there are many pitfalls where they can make mistakes. Yes.
Okay.
Yeah.
So let's start with our chapter 1. We'll start with the searching of a rental property. What are the common ways to search a property here?
Several sources. You can check on Marketplace, social media platforms. Realtors can help with that. And also there are some local newspapers in some cities where you can see the rental places.
Okay, lots of things then.
Yes.
So let's pick one by one. You think one is better than other?
No, nothing like that. It depends on the preferences and depends where you're comfortable.
Okay.
Right?
Okay.
And every city might have different answer to it as well. Yes.
Okay. So the easiest way is social media and online, right?
It is, but you have to be extra careful.
What are the pros and cons of searching the things online?
Pros are, you're always on social media. So sending a message there, getting a reply from there might be a quick thing. But drawbacks are that there's a lot of frauds as well. So you have to be careful what you're searching and whom you're talking to. Okay,
you mentioned 3 things, right? And you started with the social media thing. I can understand because it's the social media times, right? And you mentioned a very important professional here, realtor, right?
Yes.
How a realtor can take part in this searching process?
Well, realtors are licensed to deal with any properties. And many times people think they are just doing purchase and sale. That's not the case. They can help with the rentals and they are having full qualification to do that. So when anybody is coming new to the city or within the city, they're trying to find a different place. So the realtors in that area, in that neighborhood, they know ins and out. So they can help a lot there.
Okay. Do tenant pay to realtor for these services?
For most cases, no. For most cases, landlords pay both the realtors, which means the realtor representing the landlord and the realtor representing the tenant.
Okay. Is there any extra benefit for hiring a realtor?
I would say there's an extra level of confidence. When somebody is hiring a realtor, they know that they're working with a professional. So when I mentioned about frauds on social media, the chances of having a fraud there are very, very minimal when you're working with a professional. So that's the main benefit.
Okay, I hope you mentioned all these searching things in a very generic way. As far as international students are concerned, is there something is better than other?
Nothing like that. They just need to know what their requirements are, and they need to, whoever they're talking to, they need to present their case that how many people are trying to rent together and what's the scenario. So as long as the whole picture is clear to the other party, whether it's directly talking to the landlord or to a realtor, then they can work accordingly.
Okay, that makes sense. Let's move to the next chapter. What are the main factors which you should consider while renting? Can you name few of the factors, please?
Yeah, absolutely. There are a lot of factors actually. So when somebody is coming to a new city, a new country, what's the main reason? For most people, they want to have a better life, right? A lot of immigrants, especially when they're coming to Canada, they are hoping that they will have a better life here. That's why they're coming here. So for most families, when they're moving with kids, the number one priority is school. So biggest factor is considering school ratings, right? And of course, when you come into the city, you'll be going to your job. So you have to see how far you are from the job. So commute time is a factor. In cities like Toronto or Vancouver, where traffic is a big problem, you have to consider this point. And then how far you are from the highway, from the amenities, because there will be strong winter in most cities in Canada. So you'll be dealing with a lot of driving. So if you're close to amenities, close to grocery stores, where you will be visiting almost every week, that proximity is very important.
And because when people are moving from one city to another, or maybe one country to another country, initial days they don't have like their personal commute, like their car or something, right? So having a public transport nearby is a big thing. Okay, you mentioned the schools, right?
Yes.
Does it impact the rental price as well? If you are looking, all the proximities nearby your house, will it increase your rent as well?
Definitely it does increase. And also if the school is a top rating one, definitely in that area the rent will be high. So you have to kind of do a trade-off there, that you have to set your budget, and in that budget you try to get as many tick marks as possible.
Okay. How someone can make a list, priority list of these factors? Is there any way so that they can avoid any mistake?
Main is they have to see what's the priority for their family, and then search in that area what's the normal rental price, and then you see that how many things is quite possible to get, and some of the things they are in the wishful list. So they have to see how most of the things are being matched there.
I think here the realtor's role comes in, right? Because when people is doing everything by himself, there are chances to do some mistake, or maybe they'll skip one of the major factor. But if they are in touch with any professional, he'll make sure that he's not going to skip.
Definitely, because you have somebody who's working for you. Because when you're talking as a tenant, if you're talking to a landlord directly, they're going to say it's the best property, it's the best area.
Yeah, that's right.
But when you have somebody who's working for your interest, that person will give you the pros and cons of each area, each house. And then you can make a sound decision. Yes.
Okay, that makes sense. Let's move to the type of lease agreement. I'm pretty sure here in Canada, everyone have to sign a lease, right? It's not like other countries, especially where people don't sign any legal document. What type of lease agreements are common here in Canada?
Lease agreement, I guess you're asking for the duration of the lease agreement?
Pretty much, yeah.
So in most cases, people want to sign 1 year lease, but also you can see month-to-month lease as well. So when you're talking about a lease period, that period means that both the parties are bound with each other. They cannot break the lease agreement for that time frame. If you're talking about a year lease, which means that for that 1 year, none of them can break the lease unless they're mutually agreeing to it. Okay, in a month-to-month lease, whatever notice period is there in that province, if it's 60 days, with 60 days notice, you can leave the property anytime, if it's month-to-month. But in most provinces or most cities, when you have an annual lease signed, then after that 1 year is over, then automatically lease is not cancelled. It gets converted to a month-to-month lease.
Okay.
Yes.
Which type of lease is more common?
Annual lease. It's normally good for both the parties, because if somebody is, let's say we talk, coming back to the point of school, right? If you're sending the kids to school, you also want some sort of stability as well, because all the schools here, they're linked to the postal code for that area, which means if you're staying in this house for a particular board, you can only send the kid to that school. So you don't want to keep changing that school every single month or every few months.
Okay, it seems like a big challenge, because if someone is new in the city, right, he is not sure will he continue for 12 months. How people can overcome this challenge?
Well, there are options. They can always try to find short-term leases. Maybe if not month to month, if it's too short, you can try 3 months, 6 months. Sometimes you can find landlords, even though it's not very common. Or there's an option of doing Airbnb. I know it's an expensive option, but at least if you're not sure about the city or the neighborhood, it's an option to which is worth to try. Yeah.
Okay, let me rephrase a little bit. Is it negotiable? I mean, if someone has listed his property for a 12-month lease, right, a year lease, right? So is it negotiable?
Everything is negotiable. When we're talking about any binding agreement, everything is negotiable. It depends what position we are in and what position the other party is in.
So it's a good idea.
Why not? If you're not sure, if there's something that's not clear in your mind yet, it's always better to talk to your professional, or if you're talking to the landlord directly, do convey the points. Yes.
Okay, sounds good. Let's move to the most interesting part, like challenges in this rental market. What are the main challenges?
Main challenges, first of all, as I mentioned, the frauds.
Okay, so let's divide it into two parts.
Yes.
Challenges for like international, I'll say immigrants. I'm not specifically saying for the students. All categories of immigrants, and then we'll talk about the people already in Canada.
First one, for international immigrants, right? The people who are landing in Canada. For them, there's too many variables. There's too many things for them to learn. So for them to understand the city, for them to understand what exactly they want. So that's very important, right? There are so many mistakes they can make. They can maybe move to a house that is too old and where the heating system is not the best. Or they might walk into a neighborhood where the crime rate is high. So these are the challenges. They should not be challenging, but when you don't do your proper research, they can become quite challenging and annoying as well, right?
Okay.
And then dealing with frauds. We hear in the news all the time, like, there was somebody whom we were talking to, and they were, acting as a landlord, but they were not. So make sure the amount that you're paying, the deposit that you're paying, is going to the right source. So these are the challenges which can be easily handled as long as you're very cautious.
So this fraud, as you mentioned, and even we heard a lot on social media these days, especially among international students. Can you little bit elaborate or give some examples of fraud more?
Examples are, you saw an ad on, let's say, Facebook, like somebody saying that we are the owners of this property and we can rent it to you, and you have to pay us this deposit, and they're willing to share the videos or photos of the house. And if you are too innocent, or the story they're telling you it's too believable to you, you might be just saying yes to them without physically visiting the property, or sending some of your friend to visit the property. So in that case, that person might be just lying the whole time. So you are giving some deposit amount, which is normally 2 months rent, to somebody, and after the rent is gone, then that person is not reachable anymore. So that's a very common fraud these days. Yes.
Okay, before you move to the next challenge, I have a little question on here. Let's say someone is an immigrant, right, is looking for a property. How he can decide on the rental price? Like, how he can know what's the market price in this particular neighborhood?
Everything is on the internet. Of course, you have the option of relying on your realtor. If you have some friends, some colleagues in the city, they can help you as well. Okay, they can give you a general idea about the rent.
Okay, let's say he doesn't have any professional like realtor on board, right? What channels on internet? I mean, how is there any website where
they can see where properties are rented? Rentals.ca is there, realtor.ca. These are the websites where you can see all the rental listings in the area. So when you're kind of scrolling on the map, you can try to find the trend that in this area, this type of house or this size house is getting rented for this price, or at least is listed for this price. So that can give you a fair idea about what's the range.
Okay. What about credit history? Does it make impact?
Yes, definitely. For a landlord, it's very important, because when landlord is giving a house which is earned from very hard-earned money, right?
But my question is, when someone is new, I'm especially talking about immigrants, right, who is not in Canada. So he's starting creating his history. Even, it's like first day for him. Sometimes people look for the property while they are not in Canada, right?
Yes.
They have no credit history at all in Canada. How they can overcome this challenge, especially?
Well, of course, landlord needs some sort of confidence. There's some rental buildings where they encourage all the international immigrants to come there, and they're able to make exceptions.
Okay.
In a lot of cases, the landlords will not be willing to do it. So in that case, if you're willing to rent that place only where the landlord is not comfortable, you have to find other means. In some cases, you want to find a guarantor, some friend of yours, some colleague of yours who is having confidence in you, can sign along with you on the lease, so that just to gain the confidence from the landlord. That is an option as well.
Okay.
Yeah.
And okay, let's say someone is signing as a co-signer or a guarantor. What are his or her liability now?
Liability is basically like if the tenant is not able to pay the rent or anything in the rental agreement is breached, then that person is equally liable.
Oh, okay.
So it's a responsibility, yes.
Okay, makes sense. As we are talking about challenges, right? I can think about the competition as well, especially post-pandemic time. Right now, the rental market is very competitive, right? People don't get rental units easily. What's your advice and suggestions to cope up with this competition?
By competition, first of all, I want to mention we're talking about a scenario where the supply is very less and there's more demand, which means there are too many tenants looking for the same house. In that case, if you're working with a realtor, that realtor can help you how to make your rental offer enticing for the landlord. So there are some tweaks that can be played there in your agreement to lease that can be quite positive for the landlord. Other thing is, don't take it very easy, because sometimes you're like, I'm new to the city, it's too cold outside, so let's just see the houses on the weekend. If the rental market is hot, you have to be on top as well.
You need to come out from your comfortable zone.
Yes, because you need to find a place soon. So you have to be on top. But at the same time, doesn't mean that we are making a mistake. Don't rent houses by just seeing the photos online or without visiting the area. Do go there, but don't make mistakes. That's important.
Okay, as we are going further in this particular segment, lots of questions are coming up in my mind. For example, the country I come from, India, right? There is a set rule of keeping deposits of few months before use. Is the same thing happen in Canada as well?
For most cases, say 2 months, first month rent and the last month rent, that's the deposit you're paying to the landlord.
Okay, so basically it's not like deposit because you're not gonna pay rent for first month, right?
That's right.
Okay, so
it's like an early payment of the rent.
It's like a prepayment. Okay,
Yes.
Okay, that makes sense. Is there any other hidden charges?
Most cases not, but in some cases the landlords or the building owners might ask you to pay some security deposit, which might be deposit for, let's say, losing keys or some damage in the property. But those are not mandatory things they can impose on you, especially if you're talking about the houses.
Okay.
So for most cases, if those things are being imposed on you, you are able to negotiate.
Okay, so let's talk about the pricing a little bit. I'm not talking about what price market is going on right now, because it depends upon the province to province and the city as well. What I'm talking about is, let's say everyone know they're gonna pay a little bit of like advance, and then they're gonna pay monthly rental as well. My question is, what other costs, like which bills they're gonna pay, and what other kind of costs?
So if somebody is renting a house, they are going to pay utility costs. It could be heating, electricity,
Okay,
water.
can we divide it into two parts, for condos and then freehold properties?
Yeah, for freehold properties, which means mostly houses, you are paying the rent to the landlord, and then you're paying the utilities. Utilities could be electricity, water, and gas. So these are the most common extra bills you're paying on top of your rent. And also you're taking tenant insurance as well, because most landlords will want you to take that. So this is your extra expense on top of the base rent.
Okay. There are, especially in Canada, because the winters are long and very harsh as well. What about snow removal things and lawn, moving things? Who bear these costs?
So, first of all, if you are renting a house, then tenant is doing it. In most cases, landlord will expect the tenant to remove the snow and take care of the lawn as well. If you're renting an apartment or a condo, which is mostly a building, then those things are taken care by the building itself.
Okay.
So it depends.
Okay, good to know. Let's jump into the legal side now. I understand we are in a country which is very much of law binding country, and especially in real estate as well. Can we talk a little bit in detail about what kind of things a tenant should know before he's entering into an agreement?
Yes. So most important is tenants should know that when they are signing a lease and they're moving to a house, that is their space now. So which means the landlord cannot just walk into the house any time of the day. Okay. In most lease agreements, in almost every province, they have to give you at least 24-hour notice before visiting the house. Unless there's some emergency, that's a different story. But no one can just, knock the door or open the door and come in. That's not allowed.
Does the tenant has right to deny the request?
Yes, they have it. Yeah. Because it's their space now. They're paying rent to occupy the space. So they have the right to deny, yes. But of course, it should not be unreasonable denial, but they can deny if needed. Yes. And other is that if there's anything in the house that's not working and it's not damaged by the tenant, but it's naturally something stopped working. For example, let's say heating furnace, it stopped functioning. So that's the basic right of a tenant, that heating should be working in a cold country like Canada.
Correct.
So now it's on the landlord that they have to get that fixed as soon as possible, because that's the basic right there.
Okay.
So these are the things people should know. And also, no one can, talking about especially Ontario where we are living right now, if you're planning to keep pets in a house, landlords cannot deny you from doing it. If anybody enters any landlord enters in the lease that pets are not allowed, that lease is null and void. If it's a rental building, apartment building, they might have their own set of rules, but when we're talking about houses, tenants have these laws.
That's a new information for me. I'm not talking about the listing on the realtor.ca, on marketplace, Kijiji. Sometimes people have community preferences as well. Sometimes people have gender preferences as well. Are they legal?
You can have your preferences, but if you start writing these things in your agreements, it is not legal. No.
Okay, that's quite interesting.
Everybody should have a fair chance to rent a house as long as they're qualified to do it. And that qualification should not be based on the gender, their ethnicity, or anything like that.
Okay, so like when you're buying a house or something, there is a role of lawyer as well, because he can just read your agreement and make sure everything is in place. So if someone is renting, because there is a rental agreement as well, who will take care of this? I mean, who can just make sure that you're not going to do any mistake in that?
Well, if you're hiring a realtor, right? So both the parties will have their own realtor. They'll negotiate those clauses. And if they are ethical, if they are professional enough, they will know the things that are entering the clauses. There are some things that are allowed. And if somebody wants, they can always take legal opinion as well. You can go to a lawyer and go to a paralegal and pay the fee and get the agreement reviewed. Just like any agreement, you can get reviewed by a lawyer.
Make yourself safe, right?
Yeah, why not? Yeah.
You mentioned about insurance as well. Like tenant has to take the insurance. I have a question. Like being a house owner, there is a certain time period, like for 72 hours or something, you can't keep your house unattended, right? Just for the purpose of insurance, it's insurance claims especially. Does this implement on a rental property as well?
Yes, it's always there, but it can vary. The time frame can vary from one insurance company to the other. But first of all, let's talk about why insurance is important.
Okay, yeah.
Right? Because when landlords say that the tenant should have the insurance, it's not just benefiting the landlord. It's important for tenant as well. Even though it's not mandatory, it's good to take that, because the landlord's insurance will protect the building, the structure of the house. But any liability issues, any belongings that are owned by the tenant, they're not covered by the landlord's insurance. Let me give you an example. Let's say you are renting a house,
Yeah.
okay, and you have a driveway, and somebody slips on your driveway and falls, and that person, let's say, decides to sue the occupant.
Okay.
In that case, the occupant is the tenant, not the landlord. And the landlord's insurance will not protect against the liability issues because that's just a landlord's insurance covering the building. So which means that will come to you as a tenant. If you are covered by insurance, you're okay. If you're not, then you're in a big trouble.
What attributes are covered under tenant insurance?
It's your liability of the tenant and the tenant's other occupants in the house.
Nothing
And
related
belongings.
to the materialistic segment of property, right?
No, those are covered by the landlord. So whatever amount you're paying, first of all, that amount is not very big amount
Okay.
as compared to landlord's insurance. And secondly, it's essential stuff. So it's safe for you as well as a tenant.
Okay.
Yes.
Okay. And what about the notice period?
For most cases, notice period is 60 days, but it can vary from agreement to agreement.
It can be you can break this notice period on mutual consent.
Yeah, any agreement in Canada can be changed, can be amended or cancelled with mutual agreement. But you cannot force the other party to sign on something that was not agreed upon earlier.
Let's say someone has 60 days thing in the agreement, right? But someone has to leave urgently. So if he give a replacement, is it legit thing to do, or landlord can deny that as well?
In Ontario, for example, it's allowed to have this option, but you cannot force the landlord. At the same time, landlord cannot just deny without any solid reason. Let's say I'm a tenant in a property and I have to leave the property for some reason, and I am proposing a new tenant to the landlord. If the tenant's profile is good and most of the things are positive on that profile, landlord cannot just say no to it without understanding anything. But if that profile is weak, I cannot force my landlord to just accept that tenant because I have to leave. So each party has to understand the other one.
Okay.
Yeah.
Kind of a subjective segment, right?
Yes.
Okay. There are lots of noises and the discussions online regarding the increase in the rental price. How do you think, as a professional, what should be the decent increase, or what is allowed and what is not?
First of all, it depends on the inflation, right? Why are the rents increased every year? Because everything is expensive.
That's right.
If you are talking about insurance costs, interest rates go up and down, and property maintenance, because if the landlord is owning the house, they're doing time to time, they're doing some maintenance, some repairs in the house, so they're paying for that as well.
Correct.
And if you're living in a building, somebody is coming to clean the snow for you, somebody is cutting the lawn for you, somebody is coming to repair the elevators,
Yeah.
right? So costs are going up. So that's when normally this rent increase and the inflation they go hand in hand. So mostly it's around that. And many provinces, they have the cap as well. So the province will say that maximum in this year, you can increase the rent only by this much percentage. And the government decides because they don't want it to be unfair to the tenants as well. But at the same time, they want it to be a little bit fair to the landlord as well. They should not be stuck with the same rent for 10 years because their costs have come up quite high.
Okay, that makes sense. I know we touched a subject or chapter where we talked about the snow removal maintenance and the lawn or backyard maintenance. Can you elaborate a little bit what responsibilities under the maintenance word, right, are for tenant and what are for the landlords?
Okay, for sure. First of all, when we are saying snow removal means you have to make sure your driveway and the steps to your main door, they're clear of snow. So first of all, it should not be full of pile of snow. And secondly, it should not be slippery.
Okay.
Right? If you have a sidewalk in front of your house, you want to make sure it's not slippery there as well.
And that's tenant's responsibility.
It's tenant's responsibility. In some cities, the city is taking care of it, but it's still your responsibility to make sure nobody is getting slipped on your front area. Right? And then about the lawn maintenance, as we all know, it's about lawn mowing. You have to make sure the lawn is mowed time to time. It should not be looking like bushes. Right? Otherwise, the neighbors can complain to the city about that because it can impact the overall curb appeal. And also it can cause weeds and other issues in the backyard.
Okay, let's go inside the house now, in the interior section of the house. there are many appliances which landlords give with the property by default, and there are some like furnace and heater stuff, right? Who take care of these things? Like maintenance, right? Let's say someone is something is not working. Who will bear the cost of repair or replacement if needed?
Things can vary from agreement to agreement, but in most cases, you can imagine that the appliances should be functional. That's the landlord's responsibility that everything in the house is functional, be it the heating system or the kitchen or laundry, appliances. But if in certain cases it's proven or it's evident that tenants are messing up with this equipment and because of that it's going bad again and again, then of course landlord can have a word with the tenant that this is not something that's naturally going bad, but actually it's more than wear and tear. So I know there's a thin line, but appliances normally don't just stop working for no reason. If something is old, it can die, and of course landlord will take care of it. If it's something that's brand new and now it's broken, not like it's not functioning, then it can be something that's negligence from the tenant side as well.
Well, there are a few more questions coming up, but I think they are going to the very deep legal side, so I will not touch them. I hope we covered lots of things today for the rental market. We are almost in the end of the podcast. Before we end, can you suggest few questions, like smart questions, very to the point, which a tenant should ask to the landlord before they are signing an agreement?
Yeah, main thing they should ask that how old the appliances are.
Okay.
Because I know it's the landlord's responsibility to make sure they are working, but no one wants that the day they move in, they find out that the stove is not working. Now they have to talk to the landlord to get it fixed or replaced. So do ask, how old the appliances are. Second, do ask roughly how much are the utility costs. Sometimes the houses are very old. The insulation might be poor, right? Windows might be having a lot of air leak. So your heating bills can be too high. So it's a very wise thing to ask the landlord or their agent that what is the general utility cost in that area. Of course, it depends on the usage, but everybody knows a range.
Okay.
So these are the normal things you will ask. And also, if you have any colleagues in the area, if you have any friends, or there's no harm in talking to neighbors as well, because especially if you're walking around the area or you're driving by while you're choosing the area, if somebody's outside, go talk to them.
Okay.
Any issues they faced with this neighbor, in general, how safe the neighborhood is, how good the schools are, there's no harm in talking to people. More information is always better.
Okay. Is there any online platform or website which rate the neighborhood like we have for the schools, right?
Not really. Of course, in some cities, there might be some private websites, but there's so many things. You can go to news in that area. If you follow certain areas news for 2 weeks, you would know how good the area is. How often the crimes are there. Of course, I'm sure in every city, the police has their own report for every year. How many crime scenes happened in that area, how many thefts happened in the area. So you can get some indirect signal as well how good the neighborhood is.
Okay, that's pretty much good information. That was it for today, Mandeep. Thank you so much for being with me on my very first episode of the real estate category. I'm looking forward more episodes with you.
Same here. Thank you very much. I'm sure this information should be helpful for a lot of new tenants coming to the city or to the new country as well.
Yeah, it was good. More power to us. Thank you.
Thank you.